Councilperson Klur. Here. Councilperson Redmond. Here. Mayor Stackfleth. Here. Councilperson Collings. Councilperson Stearns. Here.
Okay, moving right along, we have no special presentation tonight, so we'll move into public comment. And this is where members of the audience get to speak for 3 minutes on any subject that's not on the consent agenda that is not on the regular agenda after the consent agenda. And you can also speak about an item on the consent agenda. Do we have any takers this evening? Public comment, 3 minutes to pontificate, preach, publicize, talk, think aloud. These are words with a T, I guess. Anyhow, we have no takers. No? Yep. No? I thought somebody almost stood up there, but okay. All right, so we'll close public comment at this time and move on to council and staff comments. Mr. Huaz.
Okay. One of the things you'll see on the agenda tonight, and maybe we can wait until we get into it, but is potentially hiring Cosmot Real Estate, who is an offshoot of Cosmot Services, for potentially shepherding us through the Surplus Land Act for the landing. And you know, we've got this on the agenda. You know, we could table it for now, or we'll leave it up to council. But talking to Jeff Mitchum, he's actually feeling comfortable enough that he thinks he can carry us through. One of the things we might want to consider is if we actually want to approve this proposal, just so we have it in the back pocket in case we get something really sticky. So that's one thing. The snow removal ordinance, where we've been chewing on this for a long time. John Kenny has it. Here's the scoop. Here's the points that he came up with. He needs to fully rewrite the ordinance. The bullet points on what we need to take into consideration, or you know, that has to happen. This is a service. It's not a fee. 218 does not apply. No vote is required. The old ordinance will be retired. Because this is a benefit to businesses, this will be a cost to businesses, not to property owners. So if, for instance, if you have a structure downtown that's owned by a particular person and you've got 4 businesses in there, it is the square footage of each business that pays for that service. Because, let's see, because it is it's business-based, the charge will be, well, back to square footage again. The fee will be based on the actual cost of providing that service. We have certain options to develop an anticipated cost and to adjust annually. That may include returning overpayment of fees on those years where we don't get as much snow as anticipated. And finally, we need to figure out a way to deal with delinquencies, you know, in terms of fines and penalties. So he's rewriting this ordinance. That's the issue, because he's got to rewrite it from scratch and he doesn't have a model to follow. Finally, and there's a lot more we could talk about, but Melissa and I have been speaking to Waste Management, who took over Summit's contract, and they're rolling out green bins. What we're looking to do is potentially agendize this. I think what I'm looking for from council is direction on whether or not we want to pursue green waste services, because if we do, then we're going to need to go through the 218 process, and you guys being the representatives of the community, having the pulse of the community, do you think this is something that we should agendize?
We already did the 218 on this, so.
On the green waste portion?
Yeah, the whole thing. You were there.
Oh.
Green, brown, blue, all of it.
It's supposed to be, what do we have? We got gray. And the blue should have been put in years ago, but there's a rate that goes with that.
And this would,
And the third can was green, and I think they're different sizes and different rates. It's all been
all done.
Yeah, and it was the most vocal protest, Prop 218 protest that we've had, and they still only can't. The protest vote was still only 149-ish, 150 out of 1,900 ratepayers.
So
So it's already done. The question is whether the rates are good enough for
still to work.
waste management. Yeah.
Was this, because you remember Waste Management took over Summit's
That happened while I
contract.
was mayor, right?
Did the 218
2020.
process
That
happen
20
with Summit?
It happened with Summit, yeah. But they bought that, yeah. So,
Okay.
But
Great.
they bought the contract. So anyhow, I think we should move forward with that plan, yeah.
Okay.
I do.
Melissa, do you have a
And there
comment?
are state requirements to do so anyhow, right? State requirements to lower our waste stream, correct? Or is that
Yeah,
being
but
waived?
it's,
in
my understanding is that,
perpetuity?
you want to say something on this?
I just wanted to note that the blue bins are, they'll be sending out some notices soon, and the blue bins will be coming out hopefully by January, mid-January, I think is
Right,
their
and
expectation.
there's a rate increase that goes along with that.
And then I think that the difference is that they are not having a successful place to take the green waste, and that they're possibly needing to haul it farther than they thought, so there's a rate implication.
So then 218-wise, there may have to be adjustment for that, because it's going to have to be hauled to Reading.
I'm sorry.
Reading, it's have to go to Reading?
I actually think it's farther than Reading.
Actually,
It's-
Anderson.
Yeah.
So with green waste, I have to check. It's my understanding, and I may be wrong, that green waste isn't necessarily a requirement, under the rural exemption, but the rural exemption got extended on the last waste management call. It's their assertion that it was extended to 2030. And that's what I've got.
Comment?
You want to ask some questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So going to the first subject that you mentioned, the plowing ordinance. At the last meeting, it was my understanding that Councilmember Collins raised the possibility of keeping the ordinance as it is, basic structure as it is, but raising the rate. Was that presented to John Kenny?
In terms of the flat rate, yeah, it doesn't work. It has to be based on the service you provide, based on a square footage approach. Because I was like, John, I really would like to get this to a flat fee. It's just a lot easier to administer, and he was adamant.
If the ordinance has worked for the last 40 years or however long, 50 years, why does it not work now?
Because the fees that we need to collect based on, and this is my understanding from him, and, people get things right, sometimes they get things wrong, is that now, if you are providing a service, you need to charge what it takes to remove or to provide that service, and make sure that when you're charging for that service, it's for individual businesses, because there are differences in the size of the business, and we shouldn't be charging a flat fee across the board.
I may be mistaken, but I thought that this was part of the downtown downtown business enhancement district, or improvement district. That ordinance went into effect initially, I think, around 1959.
Yeah.
It was a self-assessment by the property owners in the district.
So
Again, maybe I'm wrong, but one of the things that we asked for at the last meeting was, please show us the prior ordinance, the ordinance that's in existence at the present time.
We have that. He has it. I can bring that back. In 2 conversations with him, he's been adamant that that will no longer work. And I can have them join us.
By Zoom or by telephone?
Yeah, right, sure.
Okay. And in my recollection, in terms of, we switched from Smith to Summit. One of the reasons we switched from Smith to Summit was to deal with the blue bag issue, the green waste issue, which Summit felt like it could deal with and Smith could not. And that was
The
5 or 6 years ago, at least?
amongst 1 to 3 problems with Smith, one was, yes, trying to start a recycling and composting program, correct. That was one of several, and there were some other ones. But the expectation was that Summit would actually bring out the blue cans and then the composting cans, but that was not to be because there was nowhere to bring it here in this county. And so it's never been started. But if Waste Management is going to start it, we have a 218 schedule of pricing. Just need to review it with them and see if another 218 process can be avoided.
Yep. So Waste Management has been in touch with Ken, and we've talked about using Public Works yard to store the cans until we can deploy them.
Yeah. The rates are there.
Yeah, good.
So,
I'll check.
Yeah, just tell your office staff, and they're going to charge us more for the service, so we do need to
Yes.
collect more for. But this was all decided in 2020.
Okay. That's good to know.
Or was it 2019? I kind of remember it being live.
Yeah, we got it started in 19.
I think it was before my
Finished in
time.
20.
Yeah, so it was 2019, actually, because it happened here. So yeah, it was before 2020. Yep. All right, Chief, nothing? All right.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome back. Jeff, anything tonight? Okay. Unless you're going to wait. Yeah, all right. So I'm going to open up and bring something to everyone's attention. Tim Stearns has decided to retire from the council, which will be later on tonight. And I'd like to thank him for his service, having done this for 8 years, and going through the struggles of just making it to the meetings. I can understand to a certain amount of certainty of what he has gone through over the years. And then there's all the frustrations with things not panning out the way we would like. That's a whole other issue. Maybe this recycling thing will work out. And that's one of those things that I was hoping would work out. So anyhow, I'm sure Tim has made it clear he's hoping so too. Tim has always been a strong proponent of doing something with the landing. And he leaves with some hope that something will happen with the landing, and we're all cheering that project on, and hopefully it will come to fruition and be a really special thing for Mount Shasta. Tim's also been a strong proponent of a vibrant downtown area, commercial area, and with the caveat that it should not be overrun by corporate, bigger than regional players, and I think he's been part of that success, and it certainly is vibrant lately, last 5-6 years. And while there are a couple corporate stores, AT&T comes to mind, for instance, certainly is more of a mom and pop, local feel to downtown. And so congratulations on having a vision and helping it to happen. Tim's also been a proponent of good government, and by that I mean budgets that are reasonable and with little or no deficits and lead to reserves. And he's been around through some pretty low growth or no growth periods in Mount Shasta where budgets were tight and adjustments had to be made. Lately, we've had some good growth in our revenues, and hopefully that will continue. And And I would have to say that with his help, the city of Mount Shasta's governmental structure has been sound. So thank you for all that. I could go on and on. Tim's presence here has been over 2 decades, and I think he will be missed ultimately. And he's also been a real help with technical, legal type things on the council, either in public or in smaller meetings. And that can be, that can solve problems, and it has. I've been a party to some of those discussions. So, Tim, thank you so much for your help with running the city over these 2 decades plus, and look forward to seeing you out and about in town. Does anyone want to add to that? Was I so thorough? I knew you would. I knew you were going to say. Go ahead, add on.
More thorough.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's another side I'd like to comment. Tim's 24 years of service, I started it with him in 2012. And having made it this long, the point that seemed to be missing from your speech is the questioning his sanity to stay on this thing for 24 years. How nuts do you have to be? But thank you nonetheless.
All right. With that all being said, do you folks have something to say independent of Mr. Stern's departure? No? Okay. All right. We'll move on to, does the city manager have any commentary on DAC, LTAC, or beautification?
We haven't had any of those 3 meetings.
Okay, nothing to report. So we move on to consent agenda. That's item number 7. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. Before I go on, was everyone at the meetings, the 12th? Okay. A, approval of minutes, November 12th, 2024. B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable, November 12th, 2024. Total gross payroll and taxes for period ending November 10th, 2024. C, second reading and adoption of ordinance CCO-24-09, amending Mount Shasta Municipal Code, Title 18, zoning, adding Chapter 18.50, objective design standards. D, monthly investment and revenue report. E, driver's license requirement removal from certain job descriptions.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through E, including ordinance CCO-24-09 by title only.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And now we move on to a discussion and possible action regarding a donation to the System Museum. Should I just introduce Jean?
Please.
Okay. Jean Nels, would you please come up and give us your presentation?
I am Jean Nels, the Executive Director at Mount Shasta System Museum, and thank you for inviting me here tonight. I am here to tell you the story of our very successful museum, and Tim probably knows a lot of it since he's been here so long. And those of you that have lived in the community, it all started in 1979 when one of the few historic buildings in our area, the fish hatchery, they wanted to take it down. It had been used for about 70 years, and with all the water being splattered on the floors and all the wear and tear that our weather does to buildings, they were going to destroy that beautiful old historic building. The Chamber of Commerce, Mount Shasta Chamber of Commerce, and some many dedicated community members said, wow, we can't let that happen. We've got to appeal to the state of California, and we also need a city museum, something that will tell the stories of Mount Shasta, because nobody is keeping those treasured stories alive. So they worked really hard. People like Frank Delgado, Tony Mello, Donna Brooks, Velma Nile, and others went to the state of California, the legislative body, and with the help of Senator Johnson, Pat Brown, the governor, signed the bill with a 25-year lease, which was just so incredible. Then the next challenge was to restore that old building with the rotting floors and the rotting roof. So they got a grant for $90,000, and as all of you know that have done any kind of building, that doesn't cover all the expense. So they did all of the labor with volunteer labor. And people like Sousa Ready Mix donated concrete. It was just an incredible effort. And after 4 years, the museum opened on the 4th of July, 1983. Their first exhibits were, of course, a ski exhibit, a logging exhibit, and the history of the town. So for the next 12 years, the next 25 years, they continued to put on new exhibits all the time. I started volunteering there in 2007. And in 2012 or 2011, I became the executive director. We're all volunteers. We donate all of our time because we consider this as a very important gift that we're giving back to our community. If you've been to the museum, and I do invite all of you to go there, I know Todd's been there, perhaps some of the rest of you have too. We have great reviews on Google and on our visitor comment page. I've handed you a few facts about the museum. We have a strategic plan that we wrote in 2012, and we update it every year in order to keep, if everybody knows where we're going, then we can get there. And I've also given you the brochure. We make a new brochure every year. We have monthly presentations. And then the fact sheet, the data sheet about how many visitors we're getting, and then their reactions to the museum. You see that pie graph there. I mean, how many people have said that this is just a great museum. It's just very heartwarming to all of us that volunteer there. So after 25 years, we were doing great, but then if any of you know anything about the normal curve, they thought after 25 years, all those first few people who had volunteered, they had left the scene, and they thought that that would be the normal curve and they would be able to get that building back. We, at that time, though, had a new influx of new volunteers, myself being one of them and others. So we started to negotiate a new lease. They gave us a 5-year lease, and I think their thinking was, well, 5 more years, those people, they're not going to volunteer anymore. But we got more volunteers. So in 2013, we had to start negotiating again, and we've been negotiating with them the last 11 years. Month to month, we've been assured that we can stay there. And this year, Senator Dolly, though, came to see the museum and with his aides and said, you know, this is a treasure, as do some of the people from the fish hatchery. And he said he would write a bill for the state of California to give us another 25-year lease. We sent out an appeal to everybody saying, please write a letter telling the legislative body what an important community organization this is. And we had an overwhelming response. Matter of fact, one of the DFW workers from Sacramento came up and saw it, and he wrote a 3-page letter saying, this facility, we must keep it. It is one of the best museums that he'd seen that was on fish hatchery grounds. So we're really proud of what we're doing. We got the lease, so we have 25 more years assured that we get the building. The only challenge is we're now in charge of all of the maintenance. And those of you that know the maintenance of old historic buildings, it's huge. So that is a big challenge in our future. And as you can see on the strategic plan that I gave you, we would like to be able to hire somebody one day, somebody to do the job that I'm doing. We have a great volunteer staff, and we continue to do a lot of amazing things. And I'll just tell you some of the exhibits we've done over the years. Of course, the history of Mount Shasta. We have a great geology exhibit with a little lava tube cave that people love to crawl through. We have 14 one-minute videos to explain about the geology of the area. We've had a fire exhibit. We have a lenticular cloud exhibit, and it's so popular that this year, it's been up for 12 years. We thought it would only stay up a couple years, but people every year say, oh, that's my favorite part of the museum. So this year, we're redoing the lenticular cloud exhibit. We're going to put up all new photos, make a new video. We've asked local film photographers to send in their own photos. And so we're going to feature local photographers on our walls. We also have the mountain climbing history, the Shasta Alpine Hut, which we were in partnership with the Sierra Club, putting that up. This year, our most current exhibit is Postcards in the Future, and we interviewed Todd for this, saying, what, would you predict for the future of Mount Shasta City? And that's part of the exhibit. We've done a water exhibit. It is, I think, a real treasure here in the community, and every year, I, of course, have to ask for money all the time. Our budget is about $130,000 for a year to put up the new exhibits, to pay the electricity, all those kinds of utility bills. And this year we did hire an administrative assistant, so I have someone there to help us. And of course, that added to our expense also. So we'll see what next year's budget is. And every year, Muriel, who I worked with before, had told me, well, this year, why don't you ask the city council for, $3,000 or $1,500 or whatever you had in your budget. And so when I talked to Melissa this year, and she said she didn't know, she didn't think it was in the budget, I would hope you would find something in the budget to give back to the museum. Many other towns, their museums they use the TOT funds, or they have endowments, or they have other city funds. We are trying to work on an endowment for the last about 8 years. We have had campaigns to try to build up our endowment fund. We're hoping to eventually have a $2 million endowment fund. We're at a little over $600,000 right now, so we're getting there, but it's going to take a while. But all of us are really dedicated to sharing Mount Shasta stories. And if any of you ever want to come there and see it, or go to our website, we have about 40 videos that we share with people. People come and get visitor info from us all the time. Sometimes they'll just walk in the door and they'll say, oh, we hear that you have stuff to do in the area, and we give them out free flyers about things to do in the area. So I think we're a really good ambassador for what we're trying to do in this area. So with that, I ask if you could give us some money this year. Any questions?
Maybe this is Melissa. We have given money in the past. What were the numbers on that?
Right. So I believe that the Sisson Museum request was for $5,000.
Yes.
And in 23-24, we gave $2,500. In 22-23, we gave $3,000. And 2021, we gave $1,500.
All right, so there's nothing really here to clarify. This is an agenda item, so Jean, we need to open it up to public comment.
Yes.
And then we'll have more discussion amongst council members.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation and for doing such a great job at the museum for all these years. And I have been there several times. Yeah. Okay, so public comment from the audience. You get to speak on this item for 3 minutes. You can just stand up and say, help them or something.
My name is Julie Cassidy. I'm on the board of the museum. ever since I retired from the Forest Service. My profession is as an archaeologist, historian. And I just think that looking for the future, we're just looking for the future. I think the TOT, does Wairika support the Siskiyou County? Wairika supports the Siskiyou County Museum with TOT. So that's just an example out there. We're way smaller than obviously the Siskiyou County budget. And Weed also supports the smaller Weed, which is a very good museum in Weed. It's more focused on the lumbering industry, but they're really helpful there. The other thing that Jean didn't mention is we have archives, and I use those periodically for different projects that I'm working on. So we house archives. For instance, we're doing a little bit of more on the Sisson hatchery, and we're looking more into the historic building and kind of how it evolved. It was built, that building, Building A, was built in 1910. That's really one of our oldest historic buildings that's still standing. And we just want to, because we know we're going to have future expenses with maintenance, which we haven't really had to contribute as much, the state has contributed. We're looking at more city support, so it would be much appreciated. One thing that, if you look at that building, its bones are still there. The size of the building is approximately what it was. It has wood casement windows, which are beautiful, but those leak, so we'll have to deal with that. The metal roof has changed from its original roof style, which would have been wood shingles. So there's just on and on. I don't want to bore you, but obviously I'm very supportive and excited about the museum. I've been volunteering for 6 years now, so on the board, so, and with exhibits. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further comments?
My name is Casey Glaubman. I actually have no connection to the museum. I would just like to say, since we're talking about it, the last time I was there was for a really, really cool geology talk. I don't even remember where the guy came from, but he did this whole long thing about the Klamath Mountain Range, the river, the history of it, the geology of the whole area, and it was really informative. Didn't go in there planning for this, but I work as a raft guide on the Klamath, and ever since then, I've been able to utilize that knowledge talking to my guests. And so just kind of an example of how the museum does really cool things for the community in unexpected ways. So I say support the museum.
All right, thank you, Casey. Is that Pam?
Hi, my name is Pamela Newman, and I would like to say that the museum is, one of our main faces of the community here. It's such an educational place to go. There's young and old that go there. There's storytelling, there's exhibits. We've just got to support this lovely little spot that we have here. And it's one of the few historic buildings, as Jean mentioned. I mean, we all know these buildings need help, but that's down the road. I mean, this one's going, so we got to keep it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
I'm John Sanguinetti, and I've been here over 30 years, and that museum's amazing. I've been in a lot of museums all over the world, and that's really unique, and it really speaks about Mount Shasta and who we are and where we are. So I think we should support it.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? All right, we'll bring this back to council for further discussion. And would anyone like to open up with some comments?
I have been going to the museum for most of my life, and now as a mom with field trips and the train exhibit, both in the front and in the back, is my son's favorite part, and it's always so exciting to see them utilize it. It's a great winter activity when there's not much to do when it's cold, and we always go to the museum, so it's a big part of our lives for sure, so I'd be in support of this.
Do you want to put a number on that?
I'd be in support of the full 5,000.
Oh, okay. Bullish on
Is
the
that a
museum.
motion?
I'd like to make a motion to, let me get my verbiage here, to donate $5,000 to the Sisson Museum.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Got that? I do. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And aye. Any opposed? And once again, thank you, Gene, for all your hard work over these years. It's a great place. It really is.
Thank you for your generosity.
And that was number 8. So let's move on to number 9. I'll make a quick introduction before Jeff speaks, but we'll probably wait for the train to go by. This is going to be about tiny home regulations, and it'll lead to a code change in our pantheon of municipal codes. Not so loud. It's thick. Codes. It's an enjoyable meeting, though. I started to read it one day, then I stopped. Okay, so for train noise, it's not that bad, Jeff, so go ahead and
Okay.
start your
Thank you, Mr.
presentation.
Mayor, council members. This is discussion item only. I want to give you just a little primer for why this came about. So during implementation, or rather the finalization of the housing element and discussions related to diversifying housing affordability through both deed-restricted housing and housing types, which is called affordability by design, which is defined at a state level. That prompted participation, particularly on the part of the Siskiyou Housing Alliance, a couple members of which here are here tonight for question and answer if you choose to go there. They provided some great insight and a hint into the organization of that group to inspire discussion around tiny houses on wheels as a form of said affordable housing by design. So that the very creation of these structures as being on wheels delivers them to the marketplace by design affordably. Further, they could be deed restricted and qualify for our regional housing needs requirements at a state level. So they do a great service in terms of meeting your objectives as specified in the certified housing element. What I've tried to do to categorize your thought process and seek direction from you is organize really 3 choices. And these can be hybridized or you can pick into one or the other. The first is status quo, no change to our municipal code. We continue to treat tiny houses as RVs by definition, which is treated in Title 16, which limits to no longer than 14-day stays, unless you're in a mobile home park. And we've got 2 of those. The second option is to expand our existing regulations, and particularly those around ADUs. Lots of municipalities that have been faced with this choice before you tonight go in this direction. It's kind of a tweener. It's saying we think they're important as affordable housing types. We think we want to tweak our municipal code accordingly, but we're not ready to go full all in on tiny homes. So what they do is they use ADUs, accessory dwelling units, interchangeably, definitionally, with tiny homes. So wherever we allow ADUs, we now allow tiny homes. And I can dig into that if you'd like me to. And finally, the all-in option is 3, where we create all new regulations which would set standards both from a land use standpoint, so that means picking zones where we would allow them, specifying specifically what type of approval process that is, conditional use permit, by right provisions, what have you, and then set specific zoning standards, including design review. So you can control the look, the shape, the feel of these tiny house villages, regulate the open space, how they're situated on property, and so on. I give you a link in your staff report to the most progressive of ordinances that I've researched in my almost half a dozen years of looking into this from previous jurisdictions. So Humboldt County did a full-blown version of this, which is to regulate tiny house villages, and then specified by number and all the standards and land use provisions that I've mentioned. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer questions. And again, remember, we've got a couple folks here to answer.
All right, so it's time for clarifying questions, and I want to ask the first one. What do you favor, Planning Director?
I think, in my experience, previous jurisdictions have leaned toward creating new provisions entirely. It doesn't quite fit, frankly, in my mind, from either a design standpoint or the provision of services into a nice, neat ADU box. It needs its own set of standards.
Thank you for being frank. Questions over here?
Yes, a number of communities, a growing number of communities have started treating tiny homes as ADUs. And it seems, would it not be appropriate to both expand the definition of ADU to include tiny homes as well as provide for the possibility of tiny home villages? It seems to me that 8 or 10 years ago, in that general time frame, we had talked about the possibility of maybe using the landing, not the landing, but using the orchard property for something like that.
Yeah, I think that would be a hybrid of option 2 and 3 or both. So sure, that okay. Makes sense. Yeah.
Not meaning to be difficult, Jeff, but I think I'm kind of leaning towards a hybrid of 2 and 3. And this brought up a whole bunch of questions, like the definition of an RV versus a tiny home with wheels. What are those distinctions versus an ADU which doesn't have wheels, or a tiny home that doesn't have wheels, and then the approval process for those relative to an ADU kind of focus, but not one where I'm not clear what the difference between an RV, which has wheels, and a tiny home less than 400 square feet that has wheels. And so those are, is there any way to, because you're the expert at this, that those worlds kind of can conflate where we get some better definitions and approval processes that maybe not for the whole tiny home village thing, just in my personal opinion, just yet, but certainly as an ADU, but not an RV kind of ADU / tiny home. Does that, yeah. Are you understanding my question?
I think I can riff off that a little, so if I may. The short answer is that will be developed and presented to you. If you give me clear direction here tonight, I will take this back to Planning Commission. We will likely set up a subcommittee of 2 of them, much like we did for the objective design process, and come back to you with bookends around framing this issue for you in a thorough way. I think the short of it is that I think of tiny homes as kind of 2 parts. It's either the inside out or the outside in. They're much like RVs from the inside out. They're on chassis. If you took off the accoutrement on the outside, you're looking at a structure that's very similar. It meets a definitional standard by certifying agencies that call it an RV. There are building code provisions for tiny homes, which we would start with, which would give us a very clear definitional standard around what they are from the inside out. Now, from the outside in, we could be as prescriptive as you want to be. I've provided a photograph here that provides examples. So you would talk about roof form, for example. You would talk about front porches, for example, window percentage of glazing on the outside of the structure itself. All this content was very much part of the objective design process that we went deep into at a planning commission and subcommittee level. So I would expect the same coming before you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you see any potential issues with this opening Pandora's box to the housing element that was passed recently? Or do you think it'll be completely separate?
Well, first, it would help meet mandates within that give staff program marching orders. So in other words, there's programs within the housing element that say explore. I think if you did a word search in the housing element, you may not come up with tiny homes, but it does specifically say by design affordability. And this is very much in line with compliance with that intent.
Can I ask sort of a leading question, softball? Jeff, do you want to talk about CEQA requirements?
Well, no.
Okay, all right.
No, I think as a discretionary act, it is subject to CEQA. We would seek for a common sense exemption, much as we've done with the general plan, some of the previous general plan updates. The housing element was a common sense CEQA exemption. Objective design standards were as well. So, I would need to probably put some sideboards on that, but that's the direction we go, yeah.
And I don't want to get the prop wrong, relation to Prop 35.
I'm not following.
Okay, we'll do it offline. All right.
So, Jeff, would it be preferable to go with a separate standalone code for tiny houses? And would that entail all the ADU issues that have been mentioned by the folks to my left? And so you don't necessarily need a hybrid because all possibilities, or nearly all possibilities, would be covered by the standalone.
What I would
Is that why you prefer to do that?
Yeah, well, I guess what I would do is do concurrent municipal code amendments. So you would get a new, we would take Title 16 mobile homes and start there. So you'd likely see an amendment to that chapter. And you would also see an amendment to Chapter 1822, which is ADUs. And that would be just a definitional one. Very, very simple modification to that chapter, which would define an ADU as consistent with a tiny home definition. And it would steer you to compliance with our new Title 16, our tiny home standards.
So two-step process and then...
Yeah, a little separate but linked, yeah.
Get the drift? Yeah. Okay. So in this case, we're not looking, there's no resolution, it's just direction. So can I speak for the group? Jeff, what you said last, in that you would amend the existing codes regarding tiny homes, ADUs and mobile homes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then lead into a standalone code for tiny homes. Sounds like a three-step process to me. I think, does anyone object to that approach? This has been hinted by the planning director as what he thinks is best.
Mayor, I think that we have to open for public comment.
That's true. So hold that thought. Public comment time. Thank you for reminding me. Always need to have public comment or public hearing. This is a public comment time for tiny home code development. Anyone want to speak to this? Pam?
Twice in one night, that's pretty
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Good to see you.
Okay, well, we'll see how this goes. Members of the council, thank you for coming out tonight on such a rainy evening. My name's Pamela Newman. I'm a business owner, a parent, a resident for 27 years. Thank you for the work you do. At the top of the agenda for tonight's meeting, well, wait, before I say that, I want to say who can raise their hands for who eats out at the restaurants in our local community ever? Okay. And who grocery shops locally here? Okay, thank you. Your mission statement mentions in part preserving the quality of life. It also mentions forming partnerships with residents. What I wanted to say is our group, the Siskiyou Housing Alliance, is wondering how exactly the council can help us, a grassroots group, create an alternative and creative housing solution for the workforce here. We all eat at the restaurants, we shop at the stores, but the workforce housing situation is challenged here. So the tiny house developments are trying to help with that situation. So in my own neighborhood, one of the oldest neighborhoods here in Mount Shasta, 6 of the houses right around me are all residents that live in Cottonwood, Redding, Red Bluff, other areas. Those houses sit empty. And our young people trying to survive on $20 an hour or $15 an hour to service aren't able to make it. There was one mechanic I heard that lives in his car. He's paid $23 an hour, but because he has child support he has to live in his car. I mean, that's crazy. We can do something about it. So think about the others, not us. I live in a comfortable home. This won't serve me, but it will serve the people that help me shop and eat out and things like that. Thank you very much.
And thank you. That was very well said, to the point. Anybody else? And we have someone, a new person, name and city of residence, please.
Hello, my name is Evan Drake. I live in Mount Shasta. Just briefly, I'm a carpenter in Mount Shasta. I have a wife, no family yet. We've identified a tiny house as our best bet toward home ownership. Right now we rent and have been for the last several years. Tiny houses, because of the design element of affordability is built in, they can either be a long-term solution or a stepping stone toward home ownership just by the affordability of building one and the quality of life that you can maintain with one without a substantial income. For many in my generation, home ownership is kind of a fading dream, and tiny houses seem to fill a gap for a lot of people. So I'm in support of it. ADUs and standalone. I think the standalone element is really helpful. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone else from the audience? Yes? Well, okay. Great. Name and city of residence?
Hi, I'm Cindy Lee Cohn, and I live in Mount Shasta. Thank you so much for this positive movement towards supporting workforce housing, affordable housing. Really, we all appreciate it. First, I want to mention that our businesses, our small businesses here, we talked earlier about how many of the mom-pop stores we have here. They have employees that are traveling from long distances in order to be able to work here and afford their housing. So we'd like to have them be able to live in Mount Shasta. And also we have businesses that are struggling to keep their employees because they can't afford the gas coming from Weed or coming from Dunsmuir or coming from Wairika. And the other thing I want to mention is that tiny homes are gorgeous. They can be, with the right CCNRs, they can be so incredibly attractive and a real boon to our town to see some beautiful little homes here. So thank you for considering moving forward with an ordinance that really supports positive movement in that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. And would anyone else like to come up? Okay, so we'll close public comment at this time and bring it back to council for any further deliberations beyond what we talked about.
Well, a few comments.
Okay.
I think our housing element is designed to allow or encourage tiny homes as one of the alternatives. Some years ago, the City Council of Mount Shasta unanimously adopted the goal that anyone who works in Mount Shasta should be able to afford to live in Mount Shasta. And this housing option is part of the range of homes that would help make that possible. So I'm in favor of both expanding the ADU definition and having a ordinance that would allow tiny home villages.
We'll consider that a motion of sorts, or at least a directional motion to staff. And would anyone like to disagree in any way? Mr. Planning Director, are we clear? Super. We will move on. We'll move on to item number 10. All right, so this is about the purchase of the unpaved parcel, usually referred to as the Brownell property on Chestnut Street. And we'll let the city manager develop this idea.
Sure. So, excuse me. The city has done a thorough environmental examination of 3 parcels, all on North Mount Shasta Boulevard, 415 North Mount Shasta Boulevard. One has a structure on it that was used formerly as a garage. It is heavily contaminated. And council made the decision that we wouldn't move forward with somehow gaining site access to it. We have, outside of that, that structure, there are 2 additional APNs or partials that are unpaved that we've been looking at in relation to a project that includes daylighting Castle Creek. And to make that happen, we need some overflow parking, and these 2 lots would provide those locations for parking lost. The environmental work showed that there is contamination consistent with those that you find in other parking lots and in, places that you park vehicles for repair, which is what you would expect. We've done ground penetrating radar. We found no underground storage tanks. We have dug test pits and taken water samples in 4 locations. There is no leaching from this site. That's all the good news. We brought on a firm to do an MIA commercial appraisal on the 2 parcels, and that came back with a value of $100,000. And that is if you could take that parcel, it wasn't contaminated, and based on the zoning, build it out to its highest and best use based on the land uses that are allowed at that location. So, but it's contaminated. And for us to be able to build it out to that highest and best use, we would need to remediate that site. So we brought in a firm to take a look at what it would take for environmental cleanup. And they said an initial cost would start at $500,000, and it's likely that it could go up. And that would include taking both of those APNs, fully excavating down to 6 feet, removing it, and hauling that dirty dirt down to a qualified site that could take contaminated soil, which is in Red Bluff. That cost is likely to rise. So with that cost of cleanup, an initial cost of cleanup that could rise, what the appraiser came back with is that it has a negative assessed value. In talking to the owner on several occasions, I said, based on council direction, well, we could offer, even though it's well above what it's worth, we could offer $60,000. And there was a flat no, and we went round and round about why he thinks that the valuation that was used by the appraisers was wrong, and it should be worth more than $100,000. And the gist of it is, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's never going to appraise for $500,000. So therefore, the assessed value is still zero. And his response was, there are only two things that I'll consider. $80,000 for a sale price, or a long-term lease with a minimum of 10 years with an annual escalator of 2%. So if our projects downtown are to move forward, it would be wise to tie up these spaces. It's just hard to square the assessed value with the asking price. And I think Councilperson Collins has some comments about potentially, if we were to purchase it, on ways to recoup those funds. But that's the gist of it.
All right, so clarifying questions.
Not a question, but to add on from our meeting a couple weeks ago with Tom Hesseldance and why this is coming about, our ad hoc committee is at that point where we see this daylighting plan taking light, and this is the next step in order to make that happen. And our group was pretty secure in the fact that we need to bring this to council in order to have that be the next pertinent step of the process.
Okay, so do you think he'll entertain a short-term lease or an extension of the current short-term lease, which ends on the 30th of December or 30th of March, or is it already over?
It ends in February.
Ends in February, okay. So we should know what our numbers are looking like by then.
If we are, I would ask that if we are to purchase it, I imagine a month extension or two. It takes a bit to draw those documents up and get those signed before the lease expires. But I would imagine.
Would you say if he sees clarity as to what our intentions are, he would do a short-term
For sure.
extension? Okay. Any more points, questions? Okay, so you go ahead.
So the eminent domain idea is off the board? Just take it from them? We pay the legal fees, it's ours?
That's a long-term play.
Because that's what it's worth, is legal fees, and we just take it and do what we want.
It's
We still have to just do a parking lot, right?
it's that potential is there. Here's my caution is that when you start taking somebody's property, their mass panic sets in that that for a city overreach, and whose property is the city going to take next? Sure, that it is a legal tool.
There will be money spent, and you still have to build.
Yeah, 30,000 compared to 80,000, and then that gives us the 5,000 saved to give the museum more money.
I like what you did there.
All right. Yeah. So let's open this up to public comment. Would anyone like to comment on this? John, come on up.
Why couldn't it be offered to somebody to develop a multi-story, two-story?
You have to come to the podium.
I got here when you exactly, you're fine. So I was wondering if it could be offered as a development, a multi-story development for high-rise, two-story residential overhead parking below.
It can't unless we're willing, if the city bought it for the 80,000, before we could entertain any offer, because we're now the owners, we would have to completely remediate that site at a minimum of $500,000 plus the sunk cost of $80,000 before we could get to the place where we could sell it to a developer.
Well, how would that pencil out if somebody, say, put 10 units up there?
It wouldn't.
It wouldn't?
Mm-mm.
So
Okay.
basically, contaminated land is
Yeah.
tricky. It's tricky development. Tricky to develop
Yeah, for
for
sure.
all those involved. Just out of curiosity, the rules regarding remediation of hazardous soil, is that a nationwide thing or is it just California? It's nationwide, right?
Well, most states have, significant environmental regulation rules, as you would suspect. That California has the most stringent, followed by New York.
Okay. 2 states I've lived in. All right, so does anyone else want to comment on the parcel at corner of Chestnut and Castle? South, the northwest corner. Come on up, Pam.
I just have one question about the bid on the cleanup. Was that done by the same company that worked on the landing?
It wasn't. It was actually one of the bids came in from the company that did work on the landing, and it was significantly higher. This is a veteran-owned 3-person shop out of Sacramento.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, for those who are wondering, that hazmat cleanups are surprisingly expensive, and $500,000 to haul all that dirt far away is going price, or worse. So there you have it. But more comments? Okay, so we'll close. You want to go?
Just real quick, that $500,000 remediation fee is only to make it usable for something other than parking.
Right.
For parking, it's just throw some concrete on there.
You're
good. Okay.
dead on.
That's
Yep,
my thought.
thanks. That's perfect.
Yep. Yes, that's a point of clarification there. So the idea is to purchase the land and create a parking lot in order to help us have parking spaces available that will be eliminated by one and or two of the projects under discussion, which is one, the green lighting, daylighting of Castle Creek, and the other one is the one-way street couplet, Chestnut and Mount Shasta Boulevard. So let's
To the chair.
talk about this. Yeah.
To Casey Glaubman's point, there is no remediation cost to the city. And actually, when you ask this gentleman, why do you want $80,000? How do you justify that? He goes, well, there's no remediation costs for me either, because I'll just lease it out to food trucks who are standing in line waiting to get there. And I'll make money on leasing it to them, and I don't have to remediate the place. So really, we're talking about there is no remediation cost options. That's kind of step one, and then we've all been here hearing great things that are going to happen in the future in Mount Shasta, daylighting the creek, and I'm not trying to say that that's not going to happen, but we've heard loads of these kinds of stories over the decades. But one thing that is real in this town is I don't know anybody who thinks we need less parking. And you just can't have enough parking, and here is an opportunity, a rare opportunity, to bring in about 20 parking spaces. Now, whether we make them parking spaces or we just lease it out to food trucks while we're waiting to see what's going to happen, that's a real, right now, no stretch, no imagination could pay for a lease or could pay for a mortgage, or even just doing quick napkin. If you're gonna spend $80,000 and you're gonna turn it into a parking lot and you're actually gonna pave it, and you're gonna put in, and let me make this clear, some charge to park on that particular place because we'll have to pay it back. And those numbers are easy. They pay off, and depending on which numbers you pick, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, they pay themselves back. Either way, we lock up a great piece of right in the middle of downtown, multiple options for us, be it parking or be it just leasing of food trucks and diversifying food options in town to, again, bring more attractiveness to town. And whether we pave it or not, or make some nice landscaping, that's details. This just seems to me, with one more piece of information, which is, well, why 80,000? The reason he's chosen 80,000, I believe, is because that parcel is 0.17 acres. Last year, over on Water Street, a less desirable area, a piece of land sold for 0.19 acres for $65,000. Sold, done, factual. And he's got a better place. He's got people lined up to rent or lease and we've already done the due diligence. There's no buried oil tanks. There's no leakage into the water table. We've made this investment to make sure this is a sound asset. For me, this is a no-brainer. The answer is yes, buy it. Don't lease it, buy it. And we will make, well, no, I want to hear everybody else first. I mean, yes, I'm settled, but I would like to hear what everybody else has.
For $80,000, I agree. For $80,000, I think it's a great investment for the city to create. I really do think we should stress the increased parking after purchasing it, but I think it's not a bad price to take.
I move that the city purchase the subject property and we authorize staff to enter into a contract for up to $80,000 for that purpose.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
And aye. So 4 yeas, 1 opposed. That would be Mr. Redmond.
Only because the guy's a dick.
So that falls under the, I don't want to give that guy anything. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Somebody sent him a clip of me.
We're talking about Brownell,
He might
not
be watching.
not
Good, let him watch.
not the other guy. All right. So, wow. Well, that concluded a lot faster than I thought it would.
Well,
Yeah.
we talked about it a few times.
Yeah, I know. It's about the 6th time, right? Wow. Great. This one should go fast. I hate to hurry you through this, Melissa, but we have $514, $515 rounded up to talk about. So go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. I've been reviewing the financials with the auditor and reviewing the different funds with the different department heads. And this was one fund that has been unused for quite some time. And so I discussed that with the auditor, and he saw no reason that we couldn't move those funds over to the Fund 50, which we're actually using on operating.
Thank you for your brevity. And does anyone not understand this? Great. We have to have public comment on it, though. So this is a transfer of a small balance in a fund. We have many funds at the city. Do you know the exact count at this point?
How many?
Like 50?
Yeah, 40 to 50. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna be going through them over the year, and there will be more.
So the funds have sometimes dedicated purposes. So like the sewage treatment fund. Okay, so you pay fees, and that money has to be spent on the sewage treatment system. Okay, this fund is going. The $515 will be transferred into another fund. Does anyone want to comment on this idea? Not that it's not welcome. It's just, okay. 1, 2, 3. Public comment is closed on this. Can someone give us a motion, please?
I move to approve the closing out of Fund 76, Fire Training Center Fund, and reallocating the $514.82 of cash on hand balance to Fund 50, the Fire Assessment District Fund.
Second.
John Redmond gets a second on that. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And aye. Any opposed? All right, that's unanimous. We move on to number 12. This is the Cosmont proposal for services to navigate the Surplus Land Act, and this is tied in with our EIFD, correct?
Yep.
Mr. Huaz will talk about this. Go ahead.
Yes. So in 2019, Gavin Newsom created Executive Order N0619. It ordered the California Department of General Services and HCD to identify and prioritize properties that are owned by governmental entities and create a registry of those properties that are no longer being used for governmental purposes. And so by extension, that includes cities like Mount Shasta. We have the landing tied up while a developer does their due diligence. And one of the things that we've talked about a bit is that in order for us to put this parcel up for sale, we have a certain amount of acres that we have a verbal agreement on, which is 85 with Pinsino Holdings. We need them to provide an approximation of what they're planning to put on the site and where, and they have to have some number of affordable housing units. And those, once they know that, we need to register our intentions with the state, with HCD, and HCD will then require us to go through an RFP process for developers of affordable housing, to bid on the ability to take on the work at that site. So, there are certain exemptions, but they're a high hurdle. One is that we build a minimum of 300 affordable housing units, or 10 times the number of acres that we have, we plan to sell, so 850 units. It's clearly not the intent we have. So we need to go through this process. Cosmont Realty, there's a gentleman on staff, Brian Moncrief, who specializes in navigating this process, and he says if everything goes right, it should take about a year, maybe a little less. I'm seeking approval for hiring Cosmont Realty for an approximate cost of $19,500. But as I stated at the beginning of the meeting, I wanted to keep this, if you approve it, in reserve and only put it into action if we run into something that is unexpected. Jeff Mitchum, our planning director, has experience navigating the Surplus Land Act on one other occasion and thinks that he can carry us through. He's done some research, so we believe we can make it through without spending the money, but it would be good to just have this in our back pocket.
Okay. Presentation? Okay, so clarifying questions. You're good? Okay. Tim?
So the Surplus Land Act applies only if we are selling property that the city doesn't have a use for. Could the city enter into a joint venture agreement with private developers to use this property? What would be the pros and cons of?
Yeah,
First of all,
I mean,
that's a
so
yes
it's a
or no, and then pros and cons.
So a couple things. If you're in a joint venture, you can't sell the property unless you go through surplus lands. Whatever way if you sell it, you're going through the process. And there may be certain joint ventures that I just haven't explored that may work. The issue would then be a long-term lease. And I know that that is not desirable for the majority of developers because most people want to come in here, part out the properties for for-profit ventures, besides the affordable housing component, and make a profit on property that has already received entitlements. So I think it would not be consistent with the agreement that we have now, but if we moved on and tried to market it this way, I think it would be tough to find somebody that would bite on it in a market that we've had a very difficult time finding developers that are interested in the property. But the potential is there to avoid going through surplus lands. I just, I can research some other instances, but if we're not selling the property as part of the entire package, I think we're going to have a tough time.
So, questions over here? So, I'm just more interested in timing here, and so, so you were thinking that planning director can actually initially try to navigate the Surplus Land Act initially.
Oh, so
you have this tentative agreement as a backdrop, but planning director will actually start the process, see how it goes.
So I'd had
trying to figure out. What I'm leading to is where's the 19,000 going to fall? Is it going to fall in 24, 25, or you thinking you can hold off executing that agreement and therefore expenditure till July?
I think we'll be able to. I do think we're going to be able. It's pretty straightforward. I think we'd be able to navigate this process without this contract. It's just the idea that, part of this. So we could even table this and say, it's not going to take that much more time to bring this back if we decide that we actually need it. If that's the route you want to go.
All right. So that's the clarifying questions portion of this agenda item. Let's go to public comment. Come on up, John.
I was just wondering about the idea of a community land trust for part of the property.
It certainly is possible, but it falls within the realm of a public-private partnership. It's trying to get somebody that's willing to enter that kind of relationship. And, the most straightforward transaction is a sale that, an entity master plans, and based on that master plan, they receive entitlements and then sell parcels of the property they purchased. And given that, we've had a hold of the landing for 25 years and we haven't had the property tied up in a very simple fee transaction, a community land trust, I don't think we'd have anybody that would bite. A lot, yeah, a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not sure how much time, but, you
Yeah.
know, if the city was somewhat interested or open to that idea, we might be able to come up with something. That's my question.
Potentially, I think somebody that would be interested in a mechanism like this would typically be a nonprofit, and therefore, and you know, it's all about what council thinks. I think the issue then comes down to, well, we put all this work into cleaning a brownfield site, and then we wouldn't see any tax revenue accrue, nor would we see services or, you know, make a dent in resolving the affordable workforce housing issues that are here. So I think those are the considerations.
Well,
that council-
I believe other community land trusts have developed tiny house communities that are paying taxes, that have owners and
Yep.
local residents.
Good.
Yeah.
It could. I think it would be, I think it would take us a really long time to find somebody that would be interested in something like that. And you know, and again, it would be a trade-off. It would be council's decision to say, okay, we're willing to forego potential tax revenue to grow our coffers for something that is a community benefit, and that's a council call.
If you spin off like 20 acres for a community land trust, would that make it easier to work with those rules for the other piece of property?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? All right, going once, twice, 3 times. Let's bring this back to council for further commentary. And Tim Stearns looks like he's ready to say something.
Yes. Todd, your immediate predecessor had expressed support for possibly transferring something like 5 acres of the landing property on the east side to a nonprofit community land trust for the possibility of affordable housing. So how could the council still consider what John Sanguinetti brought up, or that possibility of your predecessor, of having a small portion of property as a community land trust, and then perhaps selling the rest of the property?
You know, that's very doable. It's a matter of, you know, it's a council action. But what I would say, and again, I don't believe anything until an agreement is signed, but part of the plans for the site includes affordable housing, including on those east side parcels and potentially down by the railroad tracks. So, and while this developer is not interested in taking on that affordable housing, they have agreed to partner with K2, who are experts in doing 2 things when it comes to affordable housing: chasing affordable housing tax credits, PLHA, you know, other sources, and they're good at pulling transportation grants that help serve access to affordable housing, but also taking some of those funds and using it to offset the cost of infrastructure for the main site. So I think we would accomplish the affordable housing piece going through a fee simple transaction this way. But if there's will on the council to explore a community land trust for a certain portion of the landing, we could do that.
Follow-up question?
You want to continue? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We had also in the past talked about having at the landing possibility of a different height limit to allow perhaps for 3-story residential instead of 2-story residential. What we're discussing tonight doesn't affect that one way or the other, but is that a possibility going forward? There's also the idea of a hotel being there that might be more than
Oh, sure.
existing.
Yeah. I mean, so we've got a couple things that that make it a bit more difficult in that we have just passed objective design standards. So when that was a heavy lift, and that is under the current zoning. As I've been thinking about this, you can open up your zoning and say, hey, this is planned unit development, and call it a zone, planned unit development, L for landing, and create a height increase or propose a height increase. But I think we'd face a long delay and a lot of opposition to, we face opposition for any development, but the idea of trying to promote, an increase in the height limits at this site, I think we'd put our mark for development out in the future quite a bit. But yeah, it's doable, hopefully.
Hopefully one last question.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the Orchard property is, not the Orchard property, but all the landing is, I want to say, around 114 acres total. 60 acres on the west side that we had traditionally considered to be for commercial development, job growth, create living wage jobs. The Orchard is about, I think, I want to say 14 acres with maybe 9 acres that might be developable, others wetland. And then we have the east side, which is, I want to say about 50 acres, but of that only 35 or 40 acres might be developable because of the elevation. So when you're talking about in here 85 acres, which of the total acreage are we talking about for the 85 acres?
So the landing has always been listed at 127 acres. And 80 to 85 is what is considered developable. Some of it has land use covenants that say, a certain area, it has a prohibition on residential development because of remaining levels of contamination. There are other areas that Geocon, our environmental engineers out here that say that there are compaction issues. So the areas that 80 to 85 are the areas that are developable. Again, some of them limited in what we can do. The rest, right now, we've set aside and we've submitted a climate change grant with the EPA that we had that technical assistance grant on, and we've performed well on the brownfield cleanup through the EPA. We performed well through the technical assistance grant, and they called us and said, get your application in. We find your project compelling. We don't have an award. I'm hoping that we do, but the idea here is those areas that we've set aside, A, they're undevelopable. B, is to use the money, if we got that grant, to turn it into park space, including building a pond and a visitor center and restrooms and some other stuff that's out there. We've got some wiggle room in how we would actually develop it, but it's really setting the properties that aren't developed and with the idea of developing these into program park spaces at a really elegant parkway.
So one final question. At what point in the process would council be involved and knowledgeable and perhaps involved in selecting those properties that would be put up for sale as SLA, under the SLA?
We need to, first, we need to see some movement from the developers on where they, a plan that at least, shows massing and information on the number of units, acres, and, where they want to put it. And I've counseled Pinsino Holdings that if they want approval in this community, they need to bring it to council and to the public to see if their mix of proposed uses is consistent with the desires of the community. And, I've made that clear. And, the worst thing they could do is walk in here and seek approvals without following that guidance, because I think they'd fail. But that's what they need to do next.
Well, I'd like to start that we're actually talking about a $19,000, 500
Yes. Whether we want to do that.
potential fee for Land Use Act guidance. One comment that seems to be consistent through all of this is whatever the approach is, affordable housing. Be it a community land trust, which I've spent a couple of years looking at, trying to figure out ways to work, and ended up talking with the potential joint partner, K2, on the development of the land, and he almost convinced me that this just can't be done this way, that you can't find the money that you need to make a community land trust in this kind of format, but that doesn't mean this kind of format being the landing relative to other pieces of property that the city owns that may be more appropriate and increase the chances that we would get these grants and low-interest loans. And I don't want to belabor it, but other than to say, and I don't mean to speak for the council, but I'm pretty sure we've all said it many times, affordable worker housing is a key focus for all of us, because without it, there's just a continuation of problems that everybody here has mentioned.
All right, so Cosmont, 19,000 for potentially helping with the navigation of the Surplus Land Act. Any thoughts over here?
You had mentioned tabling this to see if Jeff could kind of go forward. But my question being is that 19,000, to your question, would be deferred to the 25-26 budget? Is that what we're trying to do?
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, just to, like you said, have this in the back pocket. Is that just reality?
Yeah, and I think that what we do is provide a carve-out for this year, and if we don't use it, which we'll know very shortly, I don't think we will, then it would, if we needed it, we'd bring it back in the following year. But I think we'll be able to do it on our own. But we can also table this and say, you know what, let's bring it back if we need it. So we lost 2 weeks.
Well, I'm leaning towards tabling it. Anyone else?
I would move that we table this to a future agenda item.
Second.
All those in favor of tabling item 12 to a future date, please say aye.
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 And aye. Any opposed? All right, well, that concludes the meat of the agenda for tonight. I will make a quick review of our meeting for the daylighting of Castle Creek and Mount Shasta Boulevard couplet, led by Tom Hesseldins. That was about 10 to 12 days ago. So Tom was leading the meeting, and as briefly as possible, he's very enthusiastic about the daylighting project because of the enthusiasm of the citizenry at our public meeting, I don't know, a little over a month ago here at this hall. And he thought, and I think he's right, there was more enthusiasm for that than for the couplet. So if the couplet is interesting to you, that it's something that would require some more emphasis from City Council. The plan, really condensing this down, the plan is for Tom Hesseldins, and this is based on his experience with the Wairika Creek development, is to seek grants for planning, CEQA, and part of the construction. So the daylight of Castle Creek is in about 6 segments, like block by block. And he thinks it behooves us to apply for grants for the planning, the CEQA part, and the construction of one part, which he hinted at being Sisson Meadow to Alder Street. And he thinks at least one landowner and at the end of Castle Street is very enthusiastic about this project, and the people at the Land Trust are enthusiastic about being part of the overall project and hoping to join with us to improve the Sisson Land Trust, Sisson Meadow, excuse me, and some of the facilities there. So I would say the committee gave him a green light to start the process, and I wasn't clear if this needed to come to council. Don't think so, or
We don't. We have a contractor relationship with him that's very broad in terms of the type of work he does.
right, and I brought that up near the end. Did anything need to be done? And it was
I read
concluded.
it. It doesn't.
Okay. So anyhow, that's the report on that meeting. And does anyone else have meetings they'd like to report? Many meetings were postponed due to weather from last week. They'll be made up over time. And there we have it. I'm going to suggest we don't add any future agenda items unless there's something that we've already postponed, the Cosmot proposal. Yeah. Yeah. So with that being said, I'd like to adjourn the meeting without opposition. We are concluded at 7:14. Yes.